Welcome to the Armada podcast with your host, Kelorn.
So what you're saying is that you were so obsessed with whether or not you could, you didn't stop and think whether or not you should.
Fox Omega.
It's silly, and you, the person listening to this podcast, should probably stop taking it.
And Juliet Whiskey.
Token target. I got how? Three spats? 3. I'm like struggling and dying off of 1, and you're tossing around 3?
And now, the Armada podcast.
What is up, all you admirals out there? It is I, Juliet Whiskey, here tonight with Kelorn, Fox Omega, and our special interview guest, Bobcat. Gentlemen, how's everybody doing tonight?
I'm going to be honest, it is still unbearably hot in Central Texas. We're on like day something crazy in a row of triple digits, and
It's redonkulous.
it's pretty redonkulous. That's exactly right. But
I am sweating beyond all. I'm sweating in crevices and cracks that shouldn't be sweated in. Bobcat, how are you doing? How's the weather up there? Or over there? Where is there?
Over here is in Willamette Valley, Oregon. We're doing all right. Definitely not quite as hot as Texas, but it's our hot season too. But not
That's a
quite
purely
as
relative
extreme.
term.
Yeah.
The whole planet's on fire and whatnot, but it's good. It's good. It's all good. So, they won't let me spring surprise questions on them anymore, unfortunately. But I do have one anyways. So what's the next event everybody's going to, so I can actually put something on the schedule and actually go to an event again?
ooh,
The next one I know for sure is I'm going to is Warzone.
I think so.
They've been talking about a 600 point tournament in Waco, but I have not heard that they were talking about end of August, but it sounded like they were going to delay that one. So whenever we hear about that one, I'm actually super excited because I've been so focused on playing 400 point games for so long that going to a 600 point tournament sounds super fun.
So Fox, 600 point CIS. How would you feel about that?
Oh man, I don't want to do that.
I do not want to do a 600 point GAR.
200 points of vultures. 200 points of vultures. That's all I gotta say. Yeah.
Oh man, that would be absolutely brutal. Bobcat, what you got?
We got a small kind of local tournament at the end of the month. Other than that,
Well, hit us with it. Let people know up in the Pacific Northwest area what you're doing and where it's going to be so they can book it.
yeah, we got one coming up, I think on the 27th, in Corvallis. So if anyone is interested in that, feel free to contact me on Discord.
Excellent.
I
had a good day today because I had a little extra time this afternoon and I got a chance to play a game on TTS and pulled out the old Radis fleet and caused a nice little traffic jam that I posted a picture of on the main Facebook today. Just always get a kick out of how the Radis can absolutely delete an ISD for no reason.
Yeah, I saw that. It looked glorious. But let's get into the actual podcast. On today's podcast, we have the interview with Bobcat, the International Team Championships, who were the top 4 overall fleets. I don't understand what pre-cut rounds means, but we'll continue discussion on the science of matchups and what are some conclusions that we can arrive at. I'm going to hand it over to our interviewer and interviewee, Fox, Omega, and Bobcat.
That was beautiful. I really need to debrief you on what my what my taglines mean or what my jargon means.
yeah, because which one was it? I'm sorry, my brain already deleted the.
Good. Let's leave it that way.
That's okay.
All right, Bobcat, welcome to the podcast. I have a few questions for you before we dive into kind of evaluating the ITC and how all that worked out and what we can glean from that. So, first question, how long have you been playing Armada?
I seriously started playing around the end of 2018. It was kind of a bit of a community building build up for me, because for a while I was kind of the only one at the store. So I was sharing the space with some of the X-Wing players, and some of them are like, "Oh yeah, sure,
Boo, hiss,
we'll play."
boo.
Well, they had some of their Armada stuff. They played through Wave 2, and so they humored me for a little bit, and then I just kept showing up, and eventually met another guy that's kind of become the co-leader, and he's got contacts and made new connections, and we've probably got about 6 regulars now. So
That's great for a community, like a singular city. Like that's great. Especially when you have like regional level tournaments and you travel and your 6 combined with another 6, like that's a really good turnout for a tournament.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we did play in the 2019 Prime season. I think there were around 6 of us, I think, that went to the Portland Prime, traveled up together. So that was a lot of fun.
So just to break it down for that one guy in the background going, well, 6? That's not a lot. A 2-day tournament with 6 people, well, actually with 12 people, that's 3 full games a day at about 2 hours a pop. That's a lot of
No,
people. That's a lot. Yes.
no. Well, 12 people wouldn't play a 2-day tournament. That'd be wild. Like you'd be playing
Yeah.
the same people over and over again.
And then you get to stomp the same people over and over again.
That doesn't sound fun at all.
Sure it does.
No,
Okay, I'm getting out of here. Sorry for the interruption.
there's rules and limits like to to tournament structure with number of players, but 12 is a really good, or 6, honestly 6 or 8 is a really good like casual, like, hey, let's play 2 rounds of Swiss or 3 rounds of Swiss in like an accelerated fashion. That's a really good. And then like Bobcat was just saying, like you travel with those 6 guys to another area, like it's really cool. That's a good level of like camaraderie and friendship and stuff like that. That's really cool. All right, next question. What would you say is your play style?
I can answer this one. It's B-Wings.
Competitively, yeah, B-Wings. I've kind of got 2 signature lists, the B-Wings and then the triple spats, which that idea I actually was inspired from Maturin. He had I still remember his fleet name. He called it Tarkin tosses tokens to trigger turbo lasers. So his was a double svat version, and I took it and like, what if triple? But casual, I am all over the place. I'm kind of I kind of consider myself an anti-meta player. I kind of purposely play off meta. I'll play a lot of squadless or low squad for casual nights, or just like weird stuff. Like I've been experimenting with Medine lately, and yeah, just kind of whatever passes through my mind at the time.
Okay, so token Tarkin. How? Three svats? 3. I'm
Yep.
like struggling and dying off of 1, and you're tossing around 3.
Let me say it is token management hell. But with Tarkin, clone navigation officer, a few other tricks, it can be done. I've definitely practiced the deployment. I would say take evasive action is absolutely critical to triple larges. Yeah, and
So
it can
what
let
you're
you do
saying is that you were so obsessed with whether or not you could, you didn't stop and think whether or not you should.
I've had a decent amount of success with it. So
Sorry, I just had to break out the Ian Malcolm Jurassic Park quote. That's all.
I was about to
Fox,
say
what else
that
we
was
got?
that was an
Excellent quote.
ill-timed reference. I liked it though. Um, and honestly, what are Venators but just dinosaurs of the Republic, right? Um, okay, last question. If you could give advice to the you starting the game, what would it be?
that is kind of a hard one for me. I'd say overall I'm pretty satisfied with my path um, through the game. If I had to say something though, um, like I said before, I'm kind of an off meta player. I would say respect the meta a little bit more. Just like, oh, what is this two ship about? What is this um, Sloanager about? Just fly the list like once, and then kind of have an idea of what's going on there, what to expect, and then also how to play against it. So it kind of gives you, I would say, kind of insight into how these meta lists work, and I would say probably just make you a well-rounded player overall.
That's excellent advice. I don't think enough people do that when they think about going into competitive play. They don't think about what are some of the more popular lists, what are they strong at. If you played one list over and over and over again, you get the ins and outs of what you're strong at, what you understand the limit testing of that fleet. But when you go up against something that's the new hotness, like these Yularen arcs that are flying around, um, maybe you don't fully perceive exactly how tanky those arcs can be or dangerous. That counter one isn't that adds up when when they take 3 or 4 shots to take down those types of things. And it's not just Yularen arcs, but like you said, Sloanager or double Onager, those types of things. If you don't take the time to sit there and go, what is this about? Like, what are they trying to do? And get in the head of your opponent, it can be detrimental. I think that's great advice. I think that's really, really good advice.
Absolutely, and uh, it gives you insight not only into the strengths of the list, but the potential weaknesses, or makes you aware of the limitations. So then maybe you could try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, let's move into our primary topic. Kelorn, do you want to start us off by talking about the ITC?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to play in the ITC this summer. It's run by Ataru, which from the Galactic Council that they run the TT. They kind of have the 4 major TTS tournaments a year, and the international team competition is the one that we do during the summer. The first one was last year. This year we revamped. Do you remember how many teams we had, Fox? Was it, or Bobcat? Was it 26? That's the number that's sticking in my head, right?
28,
So
112 lists.
yeah. So each team has 4 players, and you can have a 5th player as kind of like a leader or a backup. And so it was just absolute madness. It was so many people and people from all over the world. We played a team from Australia. We played a team from Spain, and then we played the UK team, and then we played you guys on the West Coast. What were the teams that you guys were the teams from that you played, Bobcat?
Okay, we played one of the Italy teams. I think it's Old Hunk Junks or something like that. Then we played the French Blue team, and then we played the Royal Canadian. Is it Air Force or Air Farce?
The Air Farce
Air,
is what they call themselves.
yeah.
I always get a kick out of their name. But so a little bit about kind of how it works is they have it's set up with a hidden ladder that we can't see, that they pair the teams up based on the total team tournament points, and then we are given the matchups, and then the team leaders, of which I was one, meet together, and you each choose a champion, and that champion is going to have then gets 2 players to choose from on the other team. So in the case of our match against Bobcat, Bobcat, who was your champion? Do you remember? Was it Felix?
Oh,
I can probably
No, it was
look. I
Bobcat.
can.
Bobcat was the champion.
was I?
Oh, wait.
Yeah, because I was our
I
champion,
can't remember.
and we were specifically trying to avoid me matching up with you.
That's right. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we chose Fox as our champion. Bobcat was chosen as the West Coast champion, and then each team gave the other one two people to choose from, and then the leftover person goes against the reserve. So it sounds kind of complicated, and there we put out some videos on kind of just how to do it this year, so that people were a little bit easier, but overall it's not too bad. But the kind of the most important thing about it is how it lets you avoid a bad matchup. So it allows you to take lists that aren't kind of like all around types of lists. You can take lists that have intentional weaknesses but are strong in other ways. And so I guess I wanted to talk with you, Fox, and with you, Bobcat, about how did your team exploit the idea of that, the fact that you didn't have to have 4 all around good lists. You could actually have lists that were a little bit off and that could be strong against some things but not strong against others. So let's start with you, Fox.
Well, I think our makeup, honestly, was a little bit different because all of us were flying lists that we were very, very familiar with. And what we found, actually, we'll talk about this a little bit later, is the struggle with weak matchups. We found that Onager and that Sloniger and Double Onager ran into more difficult matchups, and that my fleet in particular, like your fleet, it was everyone knew. You know, we had just gotten off of TXO, and everyone knew kind of the strength of your objective based Starhawk fleet. My fleet, I don't think many people had really. I had talked about it a lot on the Discord, but not many people had really seen it or interacted with it or really thought about it. And that's where a lot of our matchup strength came from. Is I was chosen as the easy matchup, I believe, more often than not, and it ended up biting some teams pretty badly because I ended up being in the top 4 in the pre-cut, which is kind of wild for a separatist Dooku fleet. Amidst all those crazy Starhawk fleets, and even looking at Bobcat's fleet with all those B wings, to be in that company is kind of crazy. And it's a testament to how my fleet took advantage of being not underappreciated, but like it was really hard to truthfully understand the potency of my fleet. And so I took advantage of that a lot, you know.
Bobcat, for you guys' matchups, particularly, you guys had a really tough third round matchup against the RCF, who were the champions last year. Where did you guys run? What did you guys run into? Any issues of trying to avoid bad matchups, or what were you guys thinking about while you were putting your matchups together?
I don't recall the others' matchups in great detail. Let's see. There was Artemis Series Starhawk matchup, and so that one was definitely a tough one to place. But we put Patrick's arc ball on that, and I think he pulled out a 7 on that one actually, which was
Which then you threw
pretty.
him against me again.
Yeah, we're hoping to recreate the magic there. But for my matchup, my fleet loves to munch on squadless lists with a low screen. So we arranged kind of the best matchup for me, and I got a large package with this Akbar list. So he had a small screen of Z95s.
I will say, thank God I was not there, because my favorite thing to do is go squadless. But I'm learning. I'm taking my black eyes left and right as we go.
So what the playing package is a really good player. Bobcat also goes by Mac and Mackenzie. Was that list one that you like? Did you you ended up beating him pretty badly, which actually surprised us quite a bit, just because he's actually a very good player. And I realized that you kind of had an advantage with the squad action. But kind of step us through that. Did you guys expect that to be a good matchup for you, or how did that? And I know he was. I think he had COVID at the time or something like that.
Yeah, he wasn't feeling well, which was certainly unfortunate. But it was certainly I believe the best matchup that I could have gotten out of that mix. Um, yeah, I guess what else do you want to know about that?
Well, here, let's rewind a little bit because what I want to do is I want to talk about each of our teams and their makeup and how they played into different strengths of matchmaking. So, Kelorn, do you want to walk everybody through what all of our players and our teams or our fleets, and kind of give everybody an understanding of how we were planning on exploiting certain matchups?
Sure. I'm not going to make you guys listen to the makeup of my Starhawk fleet again, but I was playing the fleet that I won TXO with. And again, it's focused on essentially bidding for second with an 8-point bid and trying to farm objectives, or giving the Starhawk advanced gun rate, which is, can be a terrible idea. But that being said, we also had Fox's Dooku list, which a lot of us have seen and played against in our local meta, and we know how difficult that can be. He also has played some of it on Vassal and online, so we knew that was going to be a tough matchup for people who might not be expecting it, as Fox kind of already alliterated. But then we also had Jason J. Palmetti, who you may know from the Discord, with his kind of famous double onager list. And what kind of made his list unique was the fact that he uses sensor teams, and he uses Gunner Chief Farnillian plus intel officers on both to kind of force a token management issue where you're being forced to burn tokens. And it's one of those that even my Starhawk has some trouble with that particular list archetype, because if I start burning tokens early, then I start to have quite a bit of an issue later on in the game. And I think that was what we were kind of counting on, as being able to throw Jay's list against people who are really counting on using their tokens to tank something pretty heavily, because he can force you to get rid of them pretty quickly. And then we had Jesse Valadian, who is the author of the TTS Armada mod, and he was playing his kind of patented, sort of patented, Slanager list that he won TXO with last year. And it's a pretty stock standard Slanager list at this point. He does keep Corvus to protect his Sloan Admiral, and he does use fire sprays to kind of beef up his rogue element as well. And I guess one of the things that we really wanted his fleet in particular to deal with was it actually brawls with other squad fleets relatively well. And so we wanted to be able to use him to stave off somebody who was going to try and come at it with us with a kind of a beefy squad type list. But I guess, do you want to lead Bobcat through talking about his team's lists?
Yeah, let's Bobcat, let's go through your team. You had all the people on your team. Well, you had 5 people on your team. But I see that Sam jumped in at one point. But let's go through your fleet real quick. Let's talk about can you give us a rundown of your Agate fleet real quick?
Yeah, you bet. All right, the centerpiece of the fleet is a MC-80 command cruiser. We've got a gate for the extra durability, expanded hangar bays, and then FCTs so that I can push 5 squads around. Then we're supported by a Pelta with 8R boosted comms. All fighters follow me for that extra speed boost. Then we got Wedge on a transport, which is an absolutely critical piece of the fleet. Wedge is such a toolbox, lets you do so many things. Another comms net, and then a whole pile of B-Wings. And I'd say the stealth hero of my list is actually this YT-1300. This little thing is an absolute tar pit, backed up by Jan ores. Yeah, it can just dive on a grenade and take it and let the B-Wings do their thing.
I was really interested by the fact that you took Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing. Is that something that worked out for you, or is that something that you've kind of tested in the past, or what was your reasoning there behind taking Luke Skywalker? Because it's just not one you normally see.
Yeah, he's a fairly recent addition. I've only had a okay, the name of my fleet is Super B Carrier Mark 2.12. So I've iterated on this fleet quite a bit. Yeah, Luke's only been there for a couple of iterations. He's absolutely phenomenal in this list. You get him into position with 8R. You could do a double tap with him. Anything that doesn't have a contain just runs the risk of pulling the structural or something bad. It wasn't this tournament, but a previous tournament, I was fighting against a double ISD list. The ISD has local fire control, so he's got the salvo, no contain. So literally first attack of the game, Luke flies up, pulls an injured crew, crit.
Ouch.
The next three, then 3 more B-Wings fly in, and it's guess what? It's precision strike. So flips.
I did this. I've done this
Yes.
before. It's awful.
Yes. Another game, Luke Skywalker, between him and 8R Talon, literally soloed an Architans by himself. Luke's actually a surprisingly great finisher on small ships, because then they can't use that last redirect that they normally might be counting on. So he's kind of actually a stealth finisher in some cases, as well as a great opener.
Yeah, you've got me convinced. I kind of want to go and play around with them a little bit. So the other guys in your fleet, you had Broba playing kind of a interesting Gergerod fleet with a big heavy smash you in the face Venator, 2 with a Quasar and a pile of Imperial squads. You had Patrick and his sniping arcs, which caught me by surprise with Ashoka on Navoda B. And then you had Furix with his version of the double onager list and his pile of kind of rogues to go along with it. What were when you guys were? I assume you guys talked a little bit when you were putting the team together. What was the reasoning behind taking those 4 fleets together?
Sorry. These were fleets we had practiced, and we're relatively comfortable with. We had spent a bunch of the time leading up to the tournament, kind of testing fleets against each other. So I'd say it was kind of mostly driven by playstyle and just kind of a general, with the general overarching theme of let's put a fair amount of squads in there, like fleet wide, team wide overall.
And that was in response, I take it, to the fact that you guys played RCAF in the finals last year, and they went with 4 full squad lists. I'm assuming that played into your desire to do kind of the same thing back to them this year.
Yes, we definitely drew inspiration from that.
Well, Fox, do you want to move us on to the next stage?
Yeah, do we want to? So, talking about, yeah, go ahead, Bobcat. What you got?
I guess just one more thing about the matchup system. Yeah, like you said, just the way the matchups work is sometimes you have a fleet that's not not necessarily good all comers tile list. So we definitely leaned into that. We'd usually put the double Onager or Boba Fett's list, the that Venator with the expanded and external racks, kind of as the champion to kind of draw the main attention, and then put my list as reserve, so it's kind of the sleeper of the team is how it usually went.
Yeah, what we did, more often than not, is we put Sloaniger, we put Valadian in as our champion. And I think we did that, Kelorn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we did that every single time except for the last time. And then it was you and me as the challengers.
Yeah, and what often happened, what we ran into was that we had we ran into things that where people were teching specifically against onagers, and so Jason and his double onager list had fewer problems, but Vladian with the single onager and the slonager list, that was such a common archetype over the last year that people were teching against it in the ITC this year, and they had thought about, oh, these are the things that you do when you're facing a slonager list, and so we often found that there were at least one or two fleets in any given team composition that the slonager list just didn't deal with well. And so to get around that, we were like, okay, well, we're going to put Valadian as our champion and let him pick the best matchup that he can get. And then we'll kind of let the chips fall where they lay with the rest.
Yeah. And then more often than not, presenting you and me as the challengers, it created a false sense of security, I think, in selecting my list more often than not, and giving the reserve player this awful Starhawk fleet. It ended up being a pretty good system. But yeah, we found with two fleets that were featuring onagers, that with so many fleets running around that were teching against them, even Jason and Jesse admitted this, like their early rounds were really difficult because we went up against some teams that had answers.
Well, and Jason wanted me to talk about the fact that he got thrown against Riken MSU and a Luminara list in the first two rounds, and that he really struggled with both. I think he pulled off wins in both, but they weren't big wins. And it just gets back into this concept that last year onagers were so dominant and double onager was such a scary list, and this year it just was like, okay, people had answers for it. Bobcat, when you guys were throwing fear at people, was there any fear of people teching against him?
I'd say to a degree, but that's kind of where the B-wings kind of as the sleeper agent comes into. So if they send things that are teched good against that, then we've got at least one fleet that is kind of very anti that archetype.
So, Fox, do we want to talk about individual matchups? Do we want to talk about any maybe just the last matchup between West Coast and us, or how do we want to go from here?
I think so. I think let's I think it'd be a little weighty to go over every single round and every single matchup. I think let's just focus on West Coast versus Texas and how those individual games went, because we didn't play Bobcat. You didn't play Kelorn. You didn't play me. You ended up playing Jason. So each of us have like a different experience from that final round. I guess I can go first because I was the last one. Going into no, actually that doesn't make any sense. I'll build to the excitement. I'll build to the excitement of my game, I guess. But
so let me start off with the one match that we don't have represented, and that was Valadian playing Boba Fett. And I only really have secondhand knowledge of this one. So, Bobcat, if you were watching this one, jump in. Fox and I were actually in the car coming back from our 2-day tournament when you played Jason and when Valadian played Boba Fett. But from what I understand, Valadian tried to jump his squads in early and got them trapped and destroyed, and then he ended up losing pretty much everything but his lifeboat flagship. It just sounded like it got really, really ugly, and Broba kind of baited him into an engagement early. Did you see any of that game? And then, if you want to talk about your game with J. Paul Benny.
I actually didn't get to see that game because I was playing with J. Paul Maney actually at the time. But from what I understand, I I think it was. Do you recall the objective? Was it Rift Ambush?
I think they played Rift Ambush, yeah, and Valadian likes to play Rift Ambush because he likes to kind of vault his onager around with the extra speed, but I also feel like it can get used against him.
From what I know, that's also one of Boba Fett's very favorite objectives as well.
So yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, Boba Fett's a really, really high quality player. So I think that one came out, and I think it was an 8-3 win for Boba Fett. So that kind of got us started off a little bit in the hole as the Texas team, but then we were up to you playing J. Paul Mini, Bobcat.
Yeah, that's right. So J. Paul Maney was actually my second preferred matchup. Just because my squad killing power isn't as strong as the rest of my teams. So my list definitely prefers to match up with a lighter squad screen.
And you really wanted to play Fox, right? And then we kind of screwed that up by you being champion and Fox being champion, right?
Yes. Fox was my absolute first pick. But I told my team, I got a ton of matchup support, not only this tournament but the last ITC as well. So I was like, I didn't want to kind of force them to support me all the time.
So tell us about your game with Jay. And I mean, I talked a little bit earlier about how I've found it to be his list to be difficult to play against because he tends to be able to burn my tokens. Is that what you ran into with your Gate MC80, or how did that go down?
Well, with the Gate, I've got 2 braces, so I know I can kind of at least tank 2 good shots, and then just hope I can close the distance in time. I did manage to get some bombing up on turn 2. His screen was didn't quite get into position to stop everything, but it wasn't a lot of great effect. I did manage to pin Captain Jonas with the YT 1300, and then I think it was 10 num to stop his grit. But coming into the approach, let's see, he gave me first player, which I was a little surprised at. I figured he would have taken first and selected something from my objective suite. But he gave me first, and I picked Contested Outpost, which is kind of boring, and I don't like that one, honestly. But I think it gave me the best chance. So yeah, I just try to close the gap as quickly as I can. But he was rolling pretty hot. I think the Pelta suffered 11 damage, and then was finished off by the second attack. And then against the MC80, he starts off with 13 damage.
Oh, he did tell me that to mention the fact that he really got saved by veteran gunners a couple of times in the last couple of matches, and that he just rolled into absolute insane damage a couple times.
Oh yeah.
Juliet Whiskey, did you have a quick question for Bobcat?
Indeed, I do. So, Bobcat, you contested outposts. You feel it's boring? Guys, why? Because that's my baby. That's my go-to. That's my
Yeah,
safe space.
I'm not really a brawler player. Um, I'm either hit and run with some more nimble things, or these heavy bombers. So yeah, I just find it a little, yeah, it's King of the Hill. It's okay. The battle's gonna be over here, and if you can't dislodge them, I mean that's like 80 to 120 points, which is I mean, you basically need the table to overcome that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I like playing King's Castle, and you don't have to hold back just because I say something's my favorite. If you want to lay into it, lay into it. I'm the rookie. You got every right to.
So Bobcat, that I think that ended up with a 9-2 to J. Paul Many. Well, did you end up getting tabled then? You said you lost the Pelta. Did you also lose the command cruiser?
I did. Yeah, towards the end, I tried to swing around, and I almost got out of the ignition arc. But speed 2 is just a little bit too slow to really avoid that. Yeah, my bombing wasn't very hot. Nora was there, but I don't remember her going off very much. Maybe once.
But in the end, you did kill one of the onagers to make it a 9-2 though, right?
Barely. After I got tabled, because you finish out the round in a tournament, the the secret hero, the YT 1300, scores the final hull damage and does take down one of the onagers.
That's wild. I've had games like that. So that it was more or less even. I think we were up like 2 points after that. And then I got home from LSO and I ended up playing Patrick on the next Monday. And I had played a couple of lists very similar to his before, but he really took me by surprise with the Ashoka Tano officer and Navota B on the Acclimator, and using his arcs to snipe when I didn't think that he could get them into range. So he kind of baited me out with Anakin, and I kind of fell for the bait. And he brought in his arcs and said, "Oh no, I'm going to kill all your guys." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm going to let you have those 4 squads, and then I'm just going to run with the rest." So we played Censornet. I farmed some points. He got a couple of points, and I ended up turning the Starhawk in and killing his Acclimator to kind of finish him off and preserve a 6-5. So that left us, I think that Fox needed to win, or he could lose by 4-7, I believe, and as long as the MOV was under 91. So that kind of put a lot of pressure on Felix in that last game to play you, Fox. And I guess before we get into that, Bobcat, where were you guys at after I played Patrick and it was like, okay, Felix now has to win by a fair bit to pull this out?
We felt pretty good going into that. A 91 MOV was certainly attainable if you play your cards right.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a huge lead, but it was a lead that we kind of were sitting on a little bit. But Fox, you kind of just flew into the double onager from Felix and said, "Have at it." So how did that game go for you?
Yeah, it was fun. It was. I knew with me being second player and with the navigation tomfoolery I could pull off, like a lot was on his plate. So I felt pretty good going into it. I know he did too. And so that was funny going into the game, is both of us, I feel like, had polar opposite feelings about how the game would potentially go. He chose my most wanted, which honestly I didn't anticipate. I knew that in my other 2 objectives were abandoned mining facility and infested fields. And so I knew that infested fields was dangerous for his rogues, and abandoned mining facility just would net him 0 points pretty much. And so I guess I should have understood that was a forlorn conclusion from the outset, but with Most Wanted, doing the math, if I'm able to kill, what I knew going into this fight was, with Most Wanted, if I choose one of those onagers and I kill it, he has to table me to accomplish what he needs. And I think one of the dangerous things, it occurred in the second round when he was able to get both his onagers on point on my Munificent. When Beast of Burden goes off and refreshes my brace for thermals on my flagship, it all of a sudden you start to realize, oh shoot, maybe I don't have the damage capacity to get this done. And so it forced him to kind of switch targets. And at that point I knew, okay, he's not going to be able to get everything, because the key to taking down a Watt Tambor thermal shields Munificent is you have to everything has to go into it, no matter what. And so I knew that the second he switched over to shooting the hard cell, that I had successfully accomplished my distraction job, and my Munificent and my Recusant were able to take down the Most Wanted onager, which guaranteed. I still lost, but I guaranteed the team win, which is all we needed. What I will say, that the crux from my strategy, it would have been a 7-4 and 8-3 for me, but I pulled a comms noise by doing some silly maneuvering on a rock with my Recusant, and it prevented me from having the one navigation dial I needed to get just outside of one of his ignition arcs. So that was unfortunate. It was still able to survive to get its payload off, but it almost squeaked away. But those rogues, with the strength of those rogues, is they're able to like peel away. They're able to disengage and track down something that's flying away bleeding, like that Recusant was. It was a really, really good game, and both of us felt sufficiently confident in our own abilities, and I think it shows in the score. Like, it was a close game, and it was a good game. So it was unfortunate that for me it came down to that comms noise.
So Bobcat, we're gonna probably wrap up here, but before we do, can you give me any kind of overall conclusions from the final round versus us, as well as the ITC in general? What were your impressions of this year, and do you think that next year will be something similar?
Yeah, I know our team had a lot of fun with the ITC overall. I mean, the final came down really close, so it made it exciting. A lot better than last year, where it was just kind of a blowout on one side. This was just about as close as you could get. So that made it really exciting and fun. We definitely hope to be back next year, and hope we aren't bridesmaids forever. But
yeah, 2 second place finishes in a row for you guys, right?
That's right. Yep.
So,
but the format overall is it's phenomenal. I love it. Not only it's a great team building experience. So got to know my team a little better. Have a lot of fun with them. Discuss strategy and all that stuff. As well as meeting and interacting with the larger international community, kind of in this team setting. So it's just a little more interesting than a normal tournament. Also, I feel like it allows space for archetypes that maybe are not so viable. Like my fleet, for example. I ended up second on the leaderboard out of 112. In a normal tournament, if I get matched up against double onager, I mean, I'm not getting to the top of the leaderboards. So I think that's also a great kind of aspect of this tournament is it allows some breathing room with the matchup support, to allow archetypes that maybe wouldn't perform normally as well in a normal traditional tournament.
Fox, what were your kind of takeaways from the end of the ITC? Because this is the first year that you've gotten to play in it.
It's the first year, and I actually agree with a lot of the cool stuff that Bobcat talked about, like the interacting with the international community at large was really, really cool. Getting to play with Jason and Jesse, like they live down in Houston, so Kelorn, you and I got to play with them in a team format. That was really, really cool. What I will say, as far as like meta or like matchups are concerned, it really opened my eyes to a lot of the things that I've believed but haven't really seen played out in in-person tournaments, and that is people are finding ways to combat onagers. They're finding ways, like we talked about this last week. The community gets it. There's a ton of MSU going around. People are taking thermals. People are taking Luminara. People are taking a lot of the things necessary to take down these fleets, and it's really, really cool to see. I don't know. Like we also talked about last podcast that it feels cyclical. I don't know when it'll come back around either, because I'm also seeing a lot of people have a lot of fun with these types of fleets. So yeah, we'll see. It was really, really cool. I think that's what I think that's what you can glean from a tournament like this. Not necessarily because Bobcat's right. People were flying things that were really bold and things that you wouldn't normally see in a normal tournament structure. The nature of the matchups gave people the space to do things that were risky, but it does kind of give you a view into how certain archetypes match up poorly, and I think we saw that a lot with onagers in particular. So.
Yeah, and the only thing I was going to throw in is backing up what Bobcat was saying about the international nature of the tournament. It's very neat to, in the first round, they try to not pair you with somebody from your own country. So you end up playing usually at least 2 games or 2 rounds against people from a different country than yours. So it's really kind of like forcing an interaction that may not have otherwise happened. And there are certainly issues that we had with matchups. I mean, playing with Australia was very, very difficult with the time difference there, but I also got to learn a lot about the Australian meta, which we actually talked about on one of our first podcast episodes, talking about the Australian Grand Championships. So, like I said, it's just a very cool aspect to like bring that community together, and I think that is the most important part to the ITC itself. So that being said, we're gonna end the episode with a do you think session. So Juliet Whiskey, I will let you take it off and ask Bobcat the first question.
Yes, good. So, welcome back to Do You Think? I'd say I still want to go with Hot Take 30. Can I get a vote on Hot Take 30, please?
If you want to call it Hot Take 30, I don't care. That sounds great.
Hot Take 30. Here we go. So, we're going to start off with the West Coast Bobcat. Do you think that, as a faction without the 1 or 2 toys that Rebels lean into, they're a weak faction? Do you think they are? Do you think they could use a little bit more of that oomph?
Those toys being a Gate and Tauren specifically.
I guess my thoughts on that are, well, couldn't that be said of any faction, really?
Yeah, except for Gar. Gar doesn't have toys. Continue.
So I happen to have both of those elements in my particular fleet.
Hot take, baby, off top of the dome. Just throw it at him.
I could probably do without Tauren if I had to. I'd definitely put Flight Commander back in there. I like a Gate in certain spots. I just think it's unfortunate that a Gate and the Starhawk, for example, are just so incestuous. There's just that interdependency on each other. It'd be great if you could separate them somehow, but I just don't see it.
As another Rebel player, I feel like that. While I think that both Legate and Tauren are very powerful pieces of the Rebel archetype, it also ignores the fact that there are also another whole lot of other good archetypes within the Rebel faction. We talked about rogues the other day and how rebels can lean into them, but I mean, we're also starting to see Riken MSU lists or Akbar MSU lists that are starting to do well, and these lists are really those lists really lean into the MSU type of archetype more than any specific Rebel toys.
Absolutely. The Rebels have kind of a large platter of toys to play with, I would say. Like one thing I've been toying with recently is Medine. You know what's terrifying? A Medine MC30 that can do 6 clicks at speed 4. That is terrifying.
I also like Medine with MC80 Liberties. They're really, really fun. But I digress. Juliet Whiskey, I think you've got a question for Fox, right?
Correct, Mundo. Indeed, I do. Fox the Dr. Omega. 9 times out of 10, that turn 1 Cataclysm shot. Is it a waste of effort?
Yeah, I think so. I hardly saw Cataclysm go off in hardly any games that have been bringing it. Like, deployments are getting too high. I think you got to use Hondo turn 1, and that can get turned against you. Yeah, I think turn 1 Cataclysm is. I think we get it, and it's not that great. So good luck shooting at the air, I guess, as people move around it.
I wanted to cut 2 things in here. One, I think that the round 1 Cataclysm shot is a noob stomp mechanic, and the newer the player that you play against, the more likely it is to be effective. And that being said, I played a game against Mac where on turn 1 I used Cataclysm to destroy one of his GR75s when I played him in the Texas Open Online, and he was very, very upset that I blew one of his GR75s to smithereens before he actually got to use it.
Did you just say you noob stomped Mac? That's hilarious.
That was the implication, and we'll just let that hang out there. And when Mac gets to this on the podcast, he'll yell at me in the admin chat.
I would agree on the noob stomping bit, not Mac, but in general. I'd also add, I think it's also a psychological threat. So it might force a different deployment just because the threat of it being able to be deployed is there, even though it might not actually trigger. The threat of it triggering has potentially done some work.
No, that's absolutely. I think that's similar to mines, all the proximity mines we're seeing. Like it's mostly a deployment tactic. Yeah, I think that's absolutely on point. I still think though it's silly, and you, the person listening to this podcast, should probably stop taking it. So.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a feels bad thing for sure.
Note to self: Cataclysm. Avoid it at all costs. Got it. Don't do it. And for my last hot take 30 of the night, for the 3-time world champion, Kelorn.
I'm not a world champion yet.
Yeah. The last 2 shows, 3 if you're listening on the podcast, 3 if you're watching everywhere else, which I got to get those up, so don't hate me. I'm working on it. You've won 3 championships, right? Am I crazy?
Right,
Am I not mathing well?
But those aren't worlds. Worlds is a specific thing.
Semantics. semantics. Anywho, EST and ECMs, are they really staples on larges, or is this just a kind of made up community thing?
I want to start with EST. EST, I think, is a very, very powerful officer, but only on specific ships. And I really feel like you need to have 2 redirects to be able to leverage EFT. So in that sense, I don't think it's a staple on a large. It's a staple on things that have 2 redirects or can get 2 redirects or even 3 redirects. Like I would often do against squad type lists with my Starhawk Unity list. But ECM is, I think, the most powerful and the easiest to use of the defensive retrofits. It's the only one that's available to the Civil War factions, as opposed to thermal shields. And you can debate whether or not thermal shields or ECM is better. I think that that's kind of a situational upgrade type of thing. It is very nice that I think, though, that thermal shields is 2 less points, but that's kind of. I feel like if you have the option to take ECM on a large, you kind of have to take it, or thermal shields, because if you don't, you're leaving that particular large to be more vulnerable than it needs to be. Now, there are other ways around that. Jason Girth and his Modi list like to take reinforced blast doors, so he has 3 extra health and then can discard three. So basically you're looking at like a 17 damage hull damage ISD. But outside of that, I really think the ECM is the way to go. Bobcat, what do you think about ECMs?
Um, very, very strong on a large, and I think the developers have come to realize this, because I think we've seen less larges come out that can obviously benefit from it. For example, the Rebel Providence, it's got no defensive retro, so if you want to fly that ship, you've got to either take a gate or just live without a defensive retro, and just learn to not I guess be dependent on that.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing I don't for expert shield techs for a while people have been taking different officers. So I'm not convinced expert shield techs is the premier choice on larges. I do think it's good, but I mean we're seeing Captain Nita on ISDs. I think that's really really good. As far as ECMs on larges, we're seeing some interesting alternative options. I mean, Paul in this tournament, he ran 2 larges with Madi and reinforced blast doors. I think having just a ridiculous amount of hull is a good workaround to not being able to use your defensive tokens. So I'm seeing some really interesting. ECM is still definitely the premier choice. If you're gonna bring a large or anything that's remotely valuable, you need to have ECMs or thermals. That's kind of a meta call. But people are trying to push the envelope, and I appreciate it. I think it's really, really cool to see that being done. So, yeah.
And I believe that concludes yet another. Wow, I just totally stumbled over that. Hold on, let me rewind that. And that concludes another wonderful night with the Armada podcast. Thank you all for showing up, listening, watching. I appreciate the West Coast Bobcat. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call you from here on out, for coming out for a wonderful interview. So thank you. Thank you. Where can they find you? Socials, real life, however you want to be found. You got anything you want to shout out?
I don't do socials. You can just find me on the Discord. Pretty much, Cylindrical Bobcat. That's who I am.
And if you have not joined the Discord yet, it is free. FREE free. You can't get no more free. Just click on the link. It's somewhere. We got like 8 different spots for it. So, just because I like terrorizing everybody here, you all know what's coming.
Oh God, no.
You all know what's coming. And I'm going to start with Kelorn since he unmiked first. Kelorn, give the people something nice before you leave.
Oh, it's Gen Con's going on right now, and there are some people talking a little bit about the fact that there's not that many people there. I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. I'm just hopeful and that we're going to see more and more from AMG and their organized play division as we go forward. So that we see more and better tournaments.
So stay hopeful, folks. Stay hopeful. Fox, Omega. Give them something nice.
If you've never come inside from working in the lawn when it's 100 degrees outside to take a shower, and you also get like a tall glass of water with a bunch of ice, and you drink that while you're in the shower, I don't think you've experienced anything closer to heaven than that. That's all I'm going to say.
So stay hydrated. What? Stay hydrated, I guess, folks. Bobcat. The point is to say something nice. Give people a nice feel good on the way out. You got something, anything?
Never pet a burning dog.
What has happened to this place? That's all we have time for tonight, folks. Thank you, like always, for stopping by. And remember, fly safe.
Thank you for listening to the Armada Podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, keep up with the show on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Armada Podcast. Join us on Discord with the link in the show notes. Until next time.